Late-night travel stories don't usually scare me, but this one still does, because it happened to me. This was the worst experience I've ever had on the road, and it came from a combination of bad decisions, exhaustion, and one long, uninterrupted night of driving that I should never have attempted. I won't get into why I ended up driving non-stop for 22 hours. Just know that by the time I started the drive, I was already running on fumes. I'd been awake long before I ever turned the key. How long exactly? I can't remember, and that alone should tell you how bad it was. By hour 15, the sun was gone. Not gradually, not beautifully, it just disappeared, swallowed by the horizon, leaving me alone with the road and my own thoughts. I was deep into unfamiliar territory, cruising through stretches of highway where there were no exits, no rest stops, and no signs of life. Just black asphalt and occasional reflective tape flashing under my headlights. My car was old, older than most of the vehicles passing me earlier in the day, though by that point there weren't many cars left. The headlights were weak, yellowed with age, and only illuminated a narrow cone of road ahead. The fog lights barely reached the edges, just enough to catch glimpses of trees lining the road like a wall. Beyond the light, there was nothing. It wasn't darkness, it felt more like absence. A few times my chest tightened, and I almost slammed on the brakes because it looked like the road ahead simply stopped, like the asphalt dropped off into nothing. Every time it happened, my heart would spike, and I'd grip the wheel, whispering to myself that roads don't just end. That's not a thing. That doesn't happen, right? That's when I started seeing movement on the sides of the road. At first, it was quick, peripheral, shapes that vanished the moment I looked directly at them. I told myself it was wildlife, deer, shadows, my own imagination stretching thin from exhaustion. But the shapes started to look wrong. Too tall, too still. They stood just beyond the fog lights, right at the tree line, like figures watching the road. I caught myself staring longer than I should have, my eyes searching for details that weren't there. Every time I focused, the shapes dissolved back into branches and darkness. Eventually, I forced myself to stop looking at the sides of the road altogether. That was worse, because now my mind filled in the gaps on its own. The tree branches overhead began to look like they were lowering, sagging toward the road. I had this overwhelming sensation that if I drifted even slightly, they'd reach down and grab the car. I kept my hands locked at 10 and 2, shoulders aching, jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. Then I caught up to an 18-wheeler. At first, it felt like relief, a blessing, something solid. Following the truck gave me a frame of reference. If the truck stayed on the road, then the road was real. If the truck didn't slow down, then nothing ahead was broken or missing. I kept a safe distance and settled in behind it, matching its speed. For a while, it helped. Too much. I started focusing on the back of the trailer, the reflective tape, the dull red lights, the subtle sway as it rolled over uneven pavement. Mile after mile passed, and the rest of the world faded away until there was only the truck and me. That's when I started hearing it. At first, I thought it was the radio. I reached to turn the volume down, but the radio was already off. The sound didn't come from the speakers. It came from the truck. Not clearly, not loudly. It sounded like whispering, low, layered, and rhythmic, almost like chanting. The words didn't sound like English. They didn't sound like any language I recognized. But in that moment, my exhausted brain decided it made sense. I remember thinking the truck was trying to tell me something, that it had been on the road too long, that it knew something about where this highway was going. I felt this creeping certainty that if I stayed behind it long enough, I'd understand. That scared me more than the shadows ever had. I shook my head violently, rolled the windows down, letting cold air slap my face. The whispering stopped instantly, replaced by the roar of engine noise. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I passed the truck as soon as I could. The moment I pulled alongside it, I refused to look into the cab. I don't know why, I just knew I shouldn't.
Once I was ahead, the road felt emptier than ever. The darkness pressed in harder, like it resented losing that moving landmark. Eventually, hours later, I made it to my destination. I don't remember the last stretch of the drive. That's the part that haunts me most. People say sleep deprivation is scarier than any ghost. I believe that, because if I wasn't a rational person, if I hadn't known what exhaustion can do to the human mind, I might have woken up the next day convinced that something on that road tried to reach me. And some nights, when I drive too long after work, when the road starts to blur and the dark feels a little too deep, I still hear whispers where there shouldn't be any sound at all.
Late-night shift horror stories usually sound exaggerated until you've worked one yourself. This happened in the early 2000s, back when I was doing construction work. The job that still sticks with me took place at an old public school in Dallas. Not just old in the dated building sense, old. Originally built in the early 1900s, then expanded, renovated, and stitched together over decades. You could feel it just walking the halls. Nothing matched. Floors changed height without warning, doorways led into awkward additions that didn't quite line up. We were working nights because school was still in session, from about 6 p.m. until midnight, sometimes later. Once the last janitor left and the building settled, the place became something else entirely. That night, it was just me and one other guy working near one of the side entrances. We were fitting new interior doors, trimming them down with a circular saw. Loud work, dust everywhere. The kind of job that forces your focus onto measurements and blades instead of the space around you. We had a generator running outside, extension cord snaking through the entrance. The door itself was old, thick metal, heavy as hell, probably original. It was cracked open about 5 or 6 inches so the cord wouldn't get pinched. It was dark outside, no moon that I remember, probably around 10 or 11 at night. We set one of the doors onto the sawhorses, marked it, double-checked the line. My coworker picked up the saw and was just about to start cutting when something moved. The metal door. It didn't slam. It didn't creak. It swayed, slowly opening another few inches, 5, maybe 6, then drifting back to its original position, like someone had pushed it gently and let go. The cord wasn't touching it. No wind, no vibration from the saw yet. I didn't even have time to think before my body reacted. The hair on my neck stood straight up. That cold animal warning feeling hit me hard, like something had stepped too close behind me. We both turned toward the door at the same time. My coworker broke the silence first. Did that door not open like a little kid just walked in? The way he said it, half joking, half not, made my stomach drop. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My face must have said enough. We laughed, nervously, that stupid laugh people do when they're trying to convince themselves everything's fine. He set the saw down. We stepped away from the door and walked down the hall for a minute, pretending we needed to check measurements. We told a couple of the other guys working elsewhere in the building. They laughed it off, said it was pressure change. Old buildings breathe, doors move, nothing weird about it. That explanation almost worked. Almost. We went back to the job, but something had changed. We kept glancing at that door, watching it from the corner of our eyes. Every sound made us look up. Every shift of shadow pulled our attention. The door never moved again, which somehow made it worse. The rest of the night, I avoided that entrance whenever I could, took longer routes through the building. If I came around a corner and saw that metal door cracked open, my chest tightened. I'd slow down. Sometimes I'd turn around completely and go the long way. The job wrapped up a few nights later. We moved on. Life went on. I told myself it was nothing. Years passed. Then one night, much later, I was driving past that same school after a late shift at a different job. I hadn't thought about it in years. The building looked smaller than I remembered, but just as dark. Something caught my eye. One of the side entrances was open, just a few inches. I slowed down without realizing it. The street was empty. The parking lot lights were off. No work trucks, no reason for anyone to be there. The door didn't move, but I had the sudden, overwhelming sense that if I watched it long enough, it would. I drove away. Here's the part I still can't explain. A few months later, I ran into that coworker by chance. Different job, different site. We got to talking about old work stories. I didn't bring up the school. He did, out of nowhere. He asked me if I ever thought about that metal door. Then he said something that stuck with me. I keep thinking about how it opened. Not like wind, not like pressure, like someone small didn't want to be noticed. We stood there in silence for a bit. Neither of us laughed. I still tell myself it was just an old building doing old building things, but every time I pass a construction site late at night, every time I see a heavy door cracked open when it shouldn't be, I remember the way that door moved and how something can feel simple and explainable right up until you realize how careful it was.
Late-night shift horror stories usually talk about being watched. This one is worse, because whatever's there doesn't just watch. It hates you. I work nights at a meat processing plant. I won't name it, but if you've ever driven past one at night, you know the kind of place I mean. Massive, industrial, always running, always loud. Even when it's quiet, it isn't really quiet. I knew early on that something was wrong there. Not haunted in a movie way, no chains rattling, no dramatic apparitions. Just a certainty that when I clock in at night, I have about a 99.9% chance of being interacted with by whatever shares the building with us. You don't see it at first. You feel it. It comes up behind you while you're working, so close you're sure someone's about to bump into your shoulder. You turn, ready to snap at a coworker, and there's no one there. But the air feels heavier, like something just passed through. Around midnight, during lunch break, I sit alone in one of the break rooms. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, machines hum through the walls. That's usually when it walks past. Not running, not sneaking. Purposeful, like it's on a route. When it moves, rooms get darker, not like the lights go out, but like the color drains a shade. The corners stretch, sound dulls. Once, while I was eating, laughter echoed down the hallway outside the room. Not loud, not playful, just a short burst, like someone amused themselves and moved on. No one else was there. The worst part of the plant are the cattle pens. If you've never been near them at night, it's hard to explain how wrong they feel. The animals are quiet, too quiet. Their eyes catch the light in a way that makes it feel like they're watching something behind you instead of you. That's where it gets physical. You feel fingers brush your arm, pressure at your back, a hand on your shoulder that lingers just long enough to make you flinch. It doesn't grab, it doesn't shove. It reminds you that it can. I used to think I could leave it at work. I was wrong. After long shifts, I started having dreams, violent, angry dreams that didn't feel like mine. I'd wake up tense, jaw clenched, heart racing like I'd been running. The emotion in those dreams wasn't fear. It was rage. Pure, focused rage, directed. It feels impossible. Like no living body could hold that much rage and survive. Your heart would give out. Your nervous system would burn itself down. And yet, it's there. Still working nights. Still walking past me in the plant like it owns the place. Still knocking. Still finding me when I'm not supposed to be at work. These events haven't stopped. That's what makes it worse. There's no resolution, no single moment you can point to and say that's when it ended. It's ongoing, persistent, familiar. Sometimes during my shift, I'll feel it pause behind me longer than usual, and I know, without turning around, that it's angry I noticed it again. Not because I'm afraid, but because I'm still here, and it hasn't decided what to do about that yet.